So let's jump into it here, because I know both of you, Steve and Lindy, we're probably going to be pretty interested in this, and you may want to ask some questions specific to your site or what you're looking at. So I'll probably spend, I don't know how long this can take me, 20, 30 minutes. Feel free to interrupt as we go through, but I'm just kind of show you how I did this and transition from when you're just looking at one piece of land, whether you've bought it yet or not, to I've owned the land, but I'm kind of like getting my first draft of a site plan together before I even go and give it to a civil engineer, or before I go talk to, potentially the fire marshal about detailed questions, or the city or planning, how to at least get a rough draft down on a piece of paper to show like, hey, here's what my vision is. And then we'll kind of transition into the second part of the call of like, okay, when you're actually working with the civil, what is it, the things that they're going to consider and some of the things that they're going to be doing. So let's start here, and I'll use my property, the 8 acres that we bought in Georgetown, as an example. Okay, so say let's just say you buy something, or you're looking at a specific plot of dirt, and now we want to find out, okay, how many, if I want to put one house on it or 2 houses, or I think I can do 4 houses, or whatever the case may be. I'm going to have roads, and I'm going to have these different things, right? How do I actually like start doing this? So where I started, let me share my screen and we'll kind of go through it all kind of step by step. Let's see. Sure. All right. Let's see. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So I start on Google Earth. Google Earth is just like Google Maps, except way more detail, and you can do more cool stuff. So let's see. I haven't used this for a while, but let's see how I drop in the address here. What do you got? Select a location. Where do I type in an address? I don't know where the address is. Let's find North America. Here we go. Oops. All right. Junction, San Antonio. So if you're more skilled than I am, and I don't claim to be very skilled, you can find the button that tells you where to put the address in. Here's Georgetown. Let's see. My property is right over here. This lot right there. Okay, so I have 7.6 acres here. So when I was just starting out, this is what I knew, right? I knew I had a road here. I really don't have a driveway. There's this little like dirt entrance there. I have a couple trees, and the land is mostly flat. It kind of drops slightly back this area, and there's kind of a natural tree area here. And then I was able to get on here and use some of these tools to measure. So I was literally just like, I didn't even, when I was looking at this, right, I was still, maybe I'd made an offer. I was in escrow. I didn't have like a survey or anything yet. So you can come on here and you can start measuring the different like dimensions of the property. So if you don't have a survey yet, you're just kind of looking at a property, and hey, like you want to use my building plans, and it's 140 by 110 and like kind of an L shape. You can be like, okay, well, here's what we got, right? For example, I know that this is 300 linear feet across the front of the property, and then near the rear, it's actually about 270. In the middle, it's kind of about 285 across. So as I'm doing that, I can kind of learn where everything is on this thing, and then kind of just see, like, even before I'm moving too deep into my due diligence and deciding whether I want to make an offer on this property or not, I can come up here, I can measure the the site here, and then I can say, okay, well, is this actually going to fit, right? I know it says I have this many acres, but is it a rectangle? Is it a square? Is it a weird shape, right? Like, do I even like this? Can this work? Is it practical? That kind of stuff. So from this point, let's see. There you go. You can do like this 3D thing here and spin around and kind of check stuff out. And then I'm not sure why I can't find this button where you actually like, you can drop your cursor down and start measuring stuff. Maybe I need to be closer. Does anybody know where this thing is?
I'd have to open it to see, but I thought it was a measure. It was like a measuring, like a yardstick. But let me open it up, see if I can get mine.
I wonder if I have to save it as a project first. Title, Prairie. Save, let's see. Oops. Well, I'm not going to get distracted by that. We'll keep going here. I'll get rid of this. Oh, here you go. It was just my screen was off the side.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, now cool. All right, you see this? It pops up a little distance. I can move this over to feet. And let's see, I'm going to start here in the corner of the property. And I can come down over here. There's just stuff in the way. Right, and I can kind of come and measure and then, damn, it's being ridiculous. All right. Right, so then I know, okay, there's there, and then you can actually kind of play with different things. Done, start new. And I can say, okay, if I want to be over here, like before this tree, right? I know I am about 140 feet across, and then I can come up. So 140 plus 110, what's that, 250? I'd be like right over here. So you can kind of like measure out your shape of your building, right? Like, you know, okay, look, it's going to fit in there. So what I did was I went and played around on there. And then I went and printed this thing out. So let's see here. We'll show you a couple things. So I literally just screenshotted this, right? And you can see here's one of these. This is like, I guess, my first idea. I was going to turn in right here and then have this long road that went all the way down to the back of the property and have like this circle. And then here's my 4 buildings, right? But it's way different than what this is. But this allowed me, I think I took this drawing and I met with the fire marshal and I said, hey, you know, Mr. Fire Marshal, here's what I want to do. What are your thoughts? And I was able to roughly measure these out. And I think I used an actual protractor because I knew that from here to here, I knew across the property was 300 feet, right? So then when I printed it, I can move my protractor and then I made like a little key for myself of 100 feet and then was able to roughly draw in these building sizes that are accurate. Lindy, what's up?
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is like a huge pet peeve of mine, but which direction do your houses face? Do they face east to west or north to south?
Well, let's look, because I am terrible with directions.
I'm just thinking.
So if I
For
zoom
me,
up here, so now I set it here. Here's north, right? So north is this way.
okay.
So my front doors, they're facing this way, right? Let's see.
So they're facing west.
Right. So here's my road here, this is the road, and you can see you turn in, and this is what they look like.
Okay.
So if I go back to that. Yeah, so they're kind of facing southwest.
Okay.
So something like that you may consider as part of like what you want to do, and maybe this is what you're referring to your pet peeve, like where the sun's, rising and setting and that kind of stuff.
Right. I mean, it just always seems like there's going to be constant sun in people's faces. You've got that morning sun that's going to rise and then the
Mhm.
evening sun that's going to set. And so I just feel like either part of the day you're going to have to put, really good blinds or some sort of shade, covering on the
Uh-huh.
windows to keep, with all the window plans that you have in your home.
Yeah.
It's just, it could put in and bring in a lot of heat and stuff like that. So what is your solution for that? Will y'all have some kind of like electric
Yeah,
blinds that will
we
come
can do
down,
something
or?
like that, but that was I consider that was a secondary factor to what I had on this property, which was my next door neighbors, right? This property here is really pretty, and there's this cute barn right here. And then you can see this property here, there's like this orchard with all these trees, and it's a gorgeous view. On the back side of me, there's a mobile home right there, and these houses are kind of not the nicest. So from that
Yeah.
perspective, I wanted the backyard fence here, and I wanted to block this out, which by default meant that here's my front door is going to be on this side. And when I played with the layout, it really only allowed me to have, because it's a rectangle and not a square, right? I'm limited to, I could only have them in a row. So that's something to consider, right? I didn't want them facing each other. My vision is to have like next door neighbors, right? So then therefore they're next to each other. But if you have a more square property, you might have like people across the street from each other instead of next door. You can kind of draw this out however you want to do it. And I think I want to just show you like, hey, that you can do this and then draw it however you want, and then take it to the city, the fire marshal, the civil engineer, and say, hey, here's my initial thoughts. What do you want to do? And you can take all these kind of things in consideration, and you don't have to make it exactly like mine. You can make it however you like it to be.
Okay.
So I took this to the fire marshal, right? I had no road behind it. And he said, well, that's great, Brett, but I have to be able to get to every part of the exterior of the building with 200 feet of hose. So a fire hose, right? And he has to stay on the road. So therefore, that meant that just from here to here, well, let's see, this is 110 feet. And anywhere you position yourself, he can't get a 200-foot hose to like back here, right? So and that was a hard rule for him. So I had to change this, and I'll show you what the next drawing was. This is the next drawing, and this is closer to current, but it's not quite current. But right, I have my road coming off the street here, and here it allowed me to kind of get close enough that I can bring it to a civil and say, hey, here's what people are wanting, and here's what I want. So some of the things that he said, right, like we're fire hydrants. He said, well, I need a fire hydrant within 500 feet of everywhere. So we literally like started measuring things out. Between here and this one, it's less than 1,000 feet. So meaning like if you're over here, you're within 500 feet this way, or within 500 feet this way. The same as you go this way. Here's one here and here, right? So some of these things to consider. And then the driveways I wanted here, I hate the parking lot idea of an assisted living. So I did that. You can play with these trees, right? So this tree I kept, this tree I kept, this tree right here I did not keep. It was right in the middle of the road. And these trees, again, it's kind of a county or city thing. They're considered heritage. You had to have a tree study done. And it was anything bigger, like at 4 feet up off the ground, anything bigger than like 12 inches, don't quote me on this, was in diameter, was considered heritage. And so I had to pay like $17,000 to cut this tree down to the city, which is stupid, but that's what it was. In addition to that, I had to plant like 14 other trees, and they gave me credit towards that 17,000. I think I had to pay like 6,000 and plant like 14 trees. So those are some things to consider. You'll have to do a tree study. But let me come back to that in a minute or 5. So this allowed me to at least get a starting point. I can go print this out. I can draw in what my vision is. And literally, like I did like so many of these, I actually drew this out and then cut it. I made this to size from a protractor and then literally cut these houses out and then made another one and then set these on the piece of paper and just moved them all over, right? I put my road where I wanted it and then started moving houses and I put them facing each other. I put them all different directions just to see what would work for me, right? And this is what I like the best. So you don't have to take this idea, but I would take the principle behind it that you can at least start with your own rough draft idea and then take that to the local authorities and ask for their input. Because based on what I wanted, I didn't get to do what I wanted. I got to do like my third best option based on really what the fire marshal wanted, and then the city I didn't have a road, I didn't have a driveway here. So they were trying to force me to put my driveway to match this person's driveway here, which we did not do, but they were pushing really hard on that. And you see my fire tank here. I initially drove it there. I actually am putting it back here behind this tree line. So let's see here. So here is our plans. This is from our civil. Let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about here. So I was going to transition now. So like here, that was your first kind of, here's how I get started. And I can go get feedback from the fire marshal, from the planning or whomever, right? Just some rough stuff. This is not like pulling permits information. This is just basic guidelines. And that way you can take it to the civil. So then we transition. Okay, hey, I took literally like that drawing, not this one here, but the one that I showed you. And I gave that to my civil. And actually, let me pull back up because I marked a bunch of stuff on it. Right, so I put all these different notes here. These were all notes from like the fire marshal. 180,000 gallon tank, 3 fire hydrants, and then I marked them 50 feet between each building. So he said if I'm gonna have only one source of water, that the buildings have to be far enough apart that hopefully both buildings are not on fire at the same time, because then you need 2 sources of water. So as long as they're 50 feet apart, right? So these are some of the questions you would potentially ask. 20 feet between the side roads A and D. So here he wanted at least 20 feet between the side roads and 20 feet of the rear buildings. So this needed to be 20 feet also behind these. And I think there was a 50 feet or something in the front yard. I wanted staff parking in the rear, visitor parking on the U-shaped driveways, back patio is this little thing here, and front porches there. So these are the notes that I made before I even gave this to my civil, after drawing it and taking it to the fire marshal to see his or her input on these things. So this is my finalized permitted plans from the civil, and this is for a stormwater permit. This is what the city, actually the city and the county had a whole bunch of comments on this. So you can see here's the road here. We have this driveway coming in. The dark line is my wall. And then I had to do the road all the way around, right? So that I can get that 200 foot of hose anywhere on the building. So you can park here and you're plenty good to get anywhere on this whole building, right? Here's my horseshoe driveways for all my buildings. This little dotted line here, this is a backyard fence there and there. That way when you're in the back, the residents can't leave and it feels more like a home. There's a front yard fence or like a side yard fence between the 2 buildings, but ultimately they're sharing just one big backyard. This is sidewalk here because staff parking is parallel parking here, or they may be able to just pull in right here because this is actually 20 feet of a setback where they can potentially pull in or parallel park here. But the road specifically is 26 feet wide. And I asked my fire marshal specifically, hey, I don't want to put a red curb. What do you need for me not to do that? And he said, well, I need your road big enough that one person can park and I can get my engine past. And he said, our minimum is 26 feet. So I said, perfect. That's how big my road's going to be. So just for cost for y'all, it's a lot of road. But I'm at 200 grand for the asphalt part, and then the concrete curb around both sides are about 80,000. So 280 for this road. And again, it's really long. I don't remember how long it is, but just for kind of rough numbers for y'all. Let's see. Stop me anytime y'all have questions. But you can see here's the trees. Oh, go ahead.
Are you in the city with this? I guess I missed that.
No, I am in the ETJ.
Good.
So there's two things regarding that the city has their hand in. One is a stormwater permit. And so there's no building permit with the city, stormwater permit, and they use that to really check like their driveway access, which is also a county thing. And really the impervious coverage. They're mostly concerned with drainage and things like that, water runoff. If I have each one of these buildings at 10,000 square feet plus all this road, then I'm covering the earth. And when we have a big old storm, they don't want all the water that should have been going into the earth to now run into my neighbor's yard. So that's what they're mostly concerned with. So most of this whole thing is relating to like detention ponds. You can see all the little lines here. It's all the stuff from like the natural flow of the ground. Let's see. The other thing, I'm in the county, but the county fire marshal does not respond to this area, and they pay the city to respond. So now I have to deal with the county fire, or excuse me, with the city fire marshal. So there's the two things there that really the city are involved in. So I had to submit permits to the county and the city, and both the county and city were very concerned, or their biggest thing was groundwater. It's really all they went into, right? Because I'm not in the city limits, so they didn't care about building. So no one's checking my framing, plumbing, electrical. Didn't care about any of that. The county does care about the septic, and they wanted an overall building permit, which is mostly all related to the site. No one actually looked at my architectural like building plans. No one checked it. No one cares. Well, they do care. They just don't have the legal ability to enforce anything in the ETJ. So let's see. Let me show you some of these ponds. So some of the things to consider with your civil is they're going to be working on your site plan, right? Which is really just how is everything going to sit on the land that you have, right? So where are your buildings going to go? Where are your roads going to go? How does it relate to the trees? And how does that relate to utilities? How does that relate to drainage? So let's take a look at some of these things here. I want to find a specific one. So what we did was rain gardens, and this is a new thing for me. I had not heard of them, but as an alternative to a detention pond, we did these rain gardens. So let me kind of roughly explain that down. But ultimately, it's like, think of like desert landscaping with like a bunch of big rocks and like cactus kind of like succulent plants. That's what these are. And essentially, the civil engineer kind of looked at the landscaping and said, okay, well, we're going to design the road and the buildings to catch that water and bring it to these things. So if it's going to land on the roof, then it's going to go into the rain gutter, and we're going to put the rain gutter in a certain way to direct the water towards this. And then same with the road, it slopes towards these things. Everything slopes towards these, and it's this big old like rock garden with plants that's, you know, dug at like a V-shaped angle, and then it has this underground pipe, so it's gravity fed here and then runs over here and then goes into like, this reminds me of like this big, she called it a wet well, but it reminds me of a big like septic like pump tank with a pump, and then it just kind of, so all the water goes there, goes to this tank, and then it kind of just percolates out into the earth. So it's essentially collecting everything, running it to a big tank, and then letting that naturally go out. Let's see here. There's some of the specs on this. So, while I'm looking for that, so the city was totally cool with that, right? We had to do all these like calculations and stuff and all these formulas. So like, we'll see it on some of these pages, but they have back and forth comments. It took me like 4 months of back and forth comments on all of this stuff. So here's an example here of this rain garden, right? It's you kind of dig this hole, you put in these layers of big rock and soil and gravel, so that it all runs down into this thing. It naturally collects there. It goes into a big pipe and then runs to this big tank that has a pump. This is the spec for the pump with the tank. I believe it's like 8 feet deep, and it's this circle from the top. And essentially it hits almost like a little septic pump tip, right? It fills up enough water, it hits a float, and then it pumps out. So this is an option. For me, it was, you know, she thought it was going to be more cost effective. I think it's going to be more expensive than doing a detention pond. But really, what are my options? I used up a lot of the site. Because what was important to me is here's my road, and I have this green belt right here, and it's about 100 feet wide here. I'm about 70, 85 feet here. And I really wanted this, like, you're going to turn in, and this looks like Little House on the Prairie, right? As you're turning in, like I said, there's all these orchards and pretty stuff over here. I didn't want to drive past a detention pond because you have to put those metal fences around them, and they're just like, I'm not, you know, that's not what I wanted. So we went this way with these rain gardens. It's clearly going to be a couple $100,000 more money. But for me, I'd rather have that because it's realistically only going to be, you know, a small number monthly in my mortgage payment versus, you know, being able to charge an extra $1,000 a month and being the most expensive facility in Georgetown. So I got all the way through the city, all their rounds of comments on that. And then the county came back after that because I had to finish all of that and then send it to the county. County came back and said, well, what about this area back here behind the trees, right? There was this like tree line here, right? And they're like, what happens if it rains over there? It's going to run into your people behind you. We're like, we're not even building anything over there. They're like, no, we need a detention pond. So we had to add this back here. So like I had to appease the city and appease the county on this. And this is all the kind of stuff that the civil engineer does. And she will do all the calculations and look at all like the 100-year rainfall and all that kind of stuff to figure all this out. Questions?
I know for like our property that we bought, there is at the very back right-hand corner, there already is a pond there. And I have noticed like a few times when I've flown and we fly over the property to land at the airport, you can see when it rains, all of the water goes into that pond.
Awesome.
So do you think they would be able to use that for us as kind of our detention pond, or are we going to have to like build something different?
It is totally based on numbers. So they're going to say you are covering this much earth with your buildings. So you need to take that much rainfall on, you know, a crazy flood year. If you had that much rainfall, you covered this much impervious covers, you need to store that water somewhere. So it'll be just based on calculations. And then it'll be based on, okay, if you have to hold X amount of gallons of water based on these calculations, then your detention pond needs to be either this size and this deep or this size and this deep. But then it also has to take into account location, right? If you really want it there and the water already flows there, then great. You may just be able to kind of do some earth movement to make it all good there. Or if it doesn't flow there and it flows somewhere else, you may just have to put a pump that moves it over there. So yeah, I would definitely say to your civil, like, hey, here's where the detention pond already is, and I like it there. Let's try and use this area. Or you might say, I really don't want that there at all. I actually want to put a house there or a road there. there's no reason why you couldn't just fill it back in and put it wherever you want. So let's talk for a minute about utilities. So this property I had did not have any utilities on it except for electric. So this is at the very beginning. And I was literally hand drew out all this stuff just to send it to her and say, hey, here's my idea of what I want for my utility line. Right. So I know I wanted septic in the backyard. So again, we're outside of the city's limits. The county is there. The county will allow us to have commercial septic. So I had a little meeting with the county and said, hey, here's what we want to do. Here's my land. And they said, I told them I wanted to build 4. I was gonna build 2 and 2. And they said, well, it's your choice. You can build one big septic for both buildings, or you can have 2 septics, 1 for each. So I'm opting for 1 for each. And that's personal preference. You can go however you like on that. But if you're going to do it in phases, you'd obviously just do 1 for 1. And then when you build your second building, you do another. So everything runs to the backyard. So again, something to consider sizing for your backyard, right? Like you can't make it too small. You have to use this area. So I kind of knew from experience that what I drew for the backyard here is bigger than my current backyard at Platinum at Mesa. So I was assuming that was good, and then I sent it to my septic designer after that, who said it was good. But they also will do a soils test on it, and I have actually way better soil at absorbing than I do at Mesa. At Mesa, you go down like 18 inches, it's solid bedrock. Here, you went down 6 feet and you didn't hit any rock. So there's a whole calculation on the septic also. It's not just like, hey, it's this many beds, so you have to have this much. It's a whole system of what's your dirt, what type of soil it is, and then how much will it collect water and this and that, and they'll design it for you. Let's see. So here's my water, my lines here. And so I have a power pole here, and there's one there. This one actually goes across this building. So this one we're taking.
I can't see your screen, Brett. Are you still sharing your screen?
Yeah, sorry, let's see.
You sound like you're about to launch into something genius. I didn't want to miss it.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, we'll start over. All right, so this is my rough draft of my utility. So I actually have the civil created a utilities, thing to submit. But this is what I did kind of the same way with the site plan to say, hey, here's my vision of this. Here's how we do it. So these little orange lines, right? Here's my 4 septic systems. In there will be the tank somewhere, and then this is all the drip lines. This is where my power comes in, right? And there's a power pole here, and one over here. And actually this line cuts across over the house of where this would be. So this one we're bringing underground to come down here. And then so we're bringing this down, and we're actually going to set in a transformer over here, so that we can run power to these 2 buildings, and then a transformer over here so we can run power to the well and the tank over here. And then probably actually I think one over here. And then this will just be sitting there waiting for phase 2 when I build these 2 buildings here. Here's my water line. So I'm going to have 2 water lines, right? You're going to have your fire line and you're going to have your drinking water line. So my fire line is it a 6 or an 8? I think it was a 6, but it might be an 8. But anyways, so it's going to come off my tank here, come up underground, and then hit my fire hydrant here and go up. And this line, see, goes like into the riser room here and here, this little green line. Right next to it is going to be my 2-inch for drinking water, and that's going to come off my well. So here's my well here. Is anybody, are you on well or city water? Lindy?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I'm pretty sure we're gonna be on city, but I know, like I said, there's 2 wells on the property. I just don't know. They have not been used in a really long time, so we're gonna have to get that checked out.
Yeah. So those are most likely residential wells and not public. It's a PWS, public well service, public water service. So if for an assisted living, you actually have to be like a public water service, and it's like a commercial well, so to speak, the same way you think of a regular septic versus a commercial septic. And that's a whole permit through the state thing. A residential well, you can just get a guy and come drill it, no big deal. So if you can connect to the city's water, I mean, to me, that's worth 300 grand, probably 200 grand. If there's a difference between the two, I would definitely do it. But we were not able to, and so you have to. Here's my well in the center, and you have to have a 150-foot radius around the whole thing, where you cannot have any hazardous material in that. Hazardous material may be like a gas station, a pig farm, but most commonly it's a septic system. So we had to make sure our septics are not within 150 feet of the wellhead. And then here's the tank for the well. So it'll go from the well to the tank with the pump, and then come and pump out to the different houses there. The other thing I wanted to mention is like different studies you have to do. So we had to do a geological study, and the city required it, I believe, as part of their stormwater permit. And it was checking like
What
literally
was the first one?
What's that?
What was the first study you said you had to do?
Oh, a geological
Geological?
study. Yeah, let me see if I can find it here. But it was literally like they were checking for like salamanders, like endangered salamanders. Not exaggerating. They check for that. They check for like caverns under your ground and stuff like that, like that kind of stuff. So that was one thing. And I thought like, oh, cool, I had this geological study done. Actually, it's called a geological assessment. And that is totally different than a geological geotech report. Let me pull that one up for you. Where am I going? So this I had done. This is a geotechnical report, which I learned is much different than a geological study. This is where they come out and they bring one of these big machines that digs down into the earth and essentially just tells you what kind of dirt you have at what layer. So let's look here. So they're saying, hey, here's one type of soil here, here's in the second type, and then it goes back to the first type in this area. And it's kind of just a really detailed soils report. And they say, okay,
would you
have... Go ahead.
So would you been able to avoid this had you had utilities from the city already on the property?
No, you will need this also for your slab. They
Got you.
if you're going to have your slab engineered, they need to know what your soil is to find out how thick it needs to be. So like, for example, let's see.
But this is a city thing, correct?
No, this is not. This is, let's see. I would just do it regardless. Like if you're going to build on slab, right? Your builder's going to want to know the specs of what type of foundation to put in there. And like, for example, this area we're at is really, really bad soil. It's like all clay, and it fluctuates really drastically. Versus like just the east side and west side of Georgetown is literally like a dividing line in the soil where it totally changes. And because of that, he said, it's all in this report here. He says there's a what word am I looking for? There can be a variance in the soil fluctuation by like up to 6 or 7 inches, right? From like going from like drought to like excessive rain, the soil will fluctuate and change. So it's good to know this kind of stuff because he spec'd out like where my slab needs to be. And
Gotcha.
You think you're going to build concrete slab, right? You're going to have these concrete beams that go, around the outside, the perimeter beam, and the beams through the middle. And it's pretty common, like, okay, they're 12 inch, they're 24 inches deep. But mine, he has them spec'd at 54 inches, like crazy deep. And he'll take it into account based on the shape of your building, how big it is. And again, like these assisted livings, right? They're super long. If it was just a 3,000 square foot square, like no big deal, it's all square, but we're talking like L's and like 150 feet long. The you know, the longer you get, the more tension, right? Like you're gonna buckle potentially. And so it's super important to have that soil reports done and have them spec out what type of slab you're gonna need for this kind of stuff. So
Sure.
that's the geotechnical study. And I didn't get that done until a few steps into this whole process. When I went, so I had my full plans, my architectural plans, then I gave it to a structural went and did all the framing, the roof joists, all of that kind of stuff, had that all done, and then said, okay, what about your slab? And I said, well, okay, we're gonna be concrete slab. And then it's like, well, do you want pier and beam or do you want post tension? And it's, you consider the soil and stuff for that kind of stuff. And then from there, it's like, well, have you done a soils report or geotechnical report so we can find out how deep the beams and the thick of your slab needs to be. And then at that point, it's like, well, yeah, now it's time to order the geotechnical report.
So I'm assuming like your civil engineer will help you walk through all of this process and
Yeah,
to figure all this out.
yeah.
Like
It's
what
really
our
just,
specific land is gonna need.
because this is where we were talking about with you, figuring out exactly what permits you're gonna need, because in that permit, it's gonna list everything that is required, right? So that was what I found out right at the very beginning, right? I took my address, here's what I wanna do, I'm gonna go talk to the fire marshal, I found out what he wants, talk to the planning department. They said, hey, you're gonna have to pull this permit, which for me was a stormwater permit, and you literally, like, they printed out and handed it to me, and or you can go online and look at it, and it literally details, you know, it's like 15 pages of like, okay, you need this and this and this, it should be in this format. So I was able to say to my civil, hey, I want you to do this job for me, but there, you know, the permit is the stormwater permit. So if you're not doing the city at all and you're going to go talk to the county, what is the name of the permit that they're going to have you do, and where is that PDF document that's going to list all those things that are going to be in this permit, right? And there's usually probably going to be other permits too, whether it's, you know, there's going to be the septic one, there's going to be the fire sprinkler one, the fire alarm one. Those will kind of be like smaller separate permits.
Okay.
So that was all I had. You can all ask whatever questions you want.
So you know, so as far as the list of permits needed, you went to the planning meeting, fire marshal first to get an idea before going to the civil engineer. Is that what you're saying?
I did, yes. Yeah, because you can call your civil and you can be like, hey, I want to develop this piece of land for assisted living. And I mean, that's just like, that's not enough information, right? Like, I mean,
You're
you
gonna have to
can start
redo
there,
stuff.
What's that?
You're gonna have to redo something because he won't give you the complete picture. So you got to hit up the fire marshal and get that planning meeting done before
Yes,
he's gonna be a
and
lot
they
of help.
could do that, right? You're actually paying them for that, but that's not my personality type, and maybe that's kind of the distinction. Is I don't trust that they're gonna do it fully. Like, I've already been burned enough times with real estate deals that I'm gonna go talk to them. And I want to hear it from their own mouth, and then I'm gonna tell you what they said, or we can do a three-way email. But I want to be involved. Like, for example, there's this woman who's developing, and it's an assisted living, but it's made for people with mental disabilities. And they're like 1 mile down the road from me, right? And she broke ground a few months ago, and they're going through this whole thing. We toured it the other day, and she was totally a hands-off owner, right? Like, hey, I have my director here, and he's going through all this stuff. And then we're talking through, I'm touring and asking questions like, did you do this, do this? No, I had no idea. Oh, I had no idea. Like, oh, I could have done that. Like, I don't want to be that person. I want to know everything about it and have my hand in it and make it exactly the way that I want. And that's just my personality. And you may be like, no, I'm gonna pay the civil engineer and he or she is gonna do it. And if they miss something, then I'll deal
Well, the
with it.
fact that you were able to come up with that handwritten version of your what was that, of your septic and all that took a lot of experience to get to that point. I mean, you wouldn't be difficult to come up with all that without having more information.
Yeah, I think it's easy. It was easier because I had already done one. So
Right.
really my whole plan is I want to copy the one that I have and just build 4 of them next to each other. And then how would I
Right.
make that work?
Right.
Yeah. Lindy, have you done any of this where you've drawn in or figured out where you want to be? You're muted.
Can you hang on 1 second? I've got a repairman here and he's
Oh, yeah.
just wrapping. Just 1 second. I'll be right back.
No worries.
We'll add out this pause, this brief pause.
Yeah. So what do you think,
I was
Steve?
trying.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I was gonna ask you,
I
Steve,
really
you were
don't,
talking
I don't
about
have nothing. I'm
No,
just
you-
soaking it all in, brother.
okay.
You know, I'm trying to figure out if I put the horse before the cart here, you know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
I've found some property, a couple of pieces of it, and I've done some due diligence, you know, some of these things. But I'm seeing there's a little bit more to it. So
There's a lot of layers.
I've never heard of
There's a
this
lot of layers.
geological study. I mean, this is it's news to me. So
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Learned that somebody's life goal was to become a septic designer.
Yeah, but you know, I'm kind of in a different area than you guys too. I mean, there's a bunch of country folks around here. I don't know if they're going to require me to do all that. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
they're country until they realize that you got
Money to be had.
money to spend.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
you're probably
This is
right.
true.
I've asked and I haven't been told any of this stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, at what point are they going to let me know that? Because I've asked these questions, you know, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think when you find a piece of property, we'll go through, watch that due diligence video and like literally just ask down the line there, like ask the city this, ask the county this, ask the fire marshal this.
Right.
Because when I did my first one, they went and told me it was all good, nothing. You're all good, no permits, no nothing. And then I demoed, I started going through everything, and then they said, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about where are all these permits?
Yeah.
I'm like, you told me I didn't have to do it.
Right.
And like,
Well,
well,
that's
no,
kind
you
of what they told me. So,
Yeah.
this is news to me.
Okay.
My
I'm
county
s-
doesn't even have a fire marshal.
Oh
for one
yeah,
thing. I'm sorry.
it's all right. What's up, Lindy?
No, sorry. Okay, I'm back.
Cool.
He was literally walking in my direction when you asked me that question. I'm like, wait, no. But he's gone now.
now.
So what was your question?
Oh, I was gonna ask if you have looked at your site, your land, and said, okay, where do I want my road? Where do I want my house, and that kind of stuff.
Kind of. I feel like we're in this weird situation where we're still trying to figure out, what is the best for us? Do we want to build 2 at one time? Do we want to do 3? Do we want to just build 1 and then start 2 halfway in? So I think we've got to figure out how many we want to do and how many we can fit on the property first, and then kind of figure out, okay, do we want to just do 1 and then or build 2 at a time? We're not quite sure what we're going to do as far as just raising capital and funding and what that looks like just yet.
Okay. Well, I guess I would start
Um,
with like how many can you fit, and if you can fit 3 or 4, you can fit it. Now, do I want to do 3 or 4? Or is that too many? Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, I'm more kind of like reserved, and let's get this first one up and running, see what the need is, and then as soon as we've got our 16 people in plus the waiting list, then I'm like, all right, then let's build 2. But then I also look at it from the other perspective and just think, well, I don't want to be building for 3 or 4 years if I just did, 1 a year. And so, but at the same time, with like you're already pre-established, you already have a waiting list of people know who you are.
Mhm.
So you're probably comfortable with building 2, 3, or 4 more. But with
Yeah.
us never have done this in our city before, it makes me a little nervous to start with 2 and then having to fill both of them that's a lot of pressure for me, I feel like.
Yeah.
With 1, I feel great. Like I don't feel like there will be a problem filling it at all. But maybe that's why I have such good business partners that are going to help push me. I don't know. I'm just
No worries. I think those are all very reasonable and intelligent concerns. I think if you have, I mean, you have a big piece of land there, and there's not a lot of competition that's like what we're doing in your city. I think
right.
you should at least do 2. Two
Yeah.
is fantastic from a
I
staffing
mean,
perspective, and also it's a lot of income.
yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards, this is just my opinion. I haven't really vocalized it with Brett and Lane and Allison yet, but I kind of feel like I want to start raising capital and getting our funding together for 2,
Mhm.
and then build the first one and then start the second one maybe halfway through the building. So then that gives me a good 6 to 8 months to get my feet wet in the first one before the second one's complete.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? It kind of gives me a little bit of time to get my staffing in order and,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So we're still building the second one while our first one is getting fully ready to go. I don't know. We'll
Yeah,
see.
that's something to consider. If you literally built them at the exact same time, I'm sure it's probably at least 10 or 15 or 20% cheaper, because you have the framer there once and he's going to go bang bang and not come back, 6 months later. But I
Yeah.
think that, I guess, from where you're at right now, right, for step 1 or the next step is, I would just print that thing out, and then if I want to have 2, I would draw. Maybe I would do this. If I want to only have 1 house, I'm going to put it here, and here's my road's going to be. If I'm going to have 2, I'm going to put them here. Here's where my roads, 3 and 4, and so on, right? Like, and then you can decide, right? But at least you know where the infrastructure is going to go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's our first step.
Mm-hmm.
I do know from one of the architects that I did talk to, he did say for our specific property, even though it's almost 9 acres, it's like 8.6 acres.
Mm-hmm.
The way the property is set, we can't get with a road in maybe in the middle of them. Like if we wanted to build them facing the highway, if we wanted to get 2 side by side facing north and south, we would have to angle them, just a slight angle. We couldn't do exactly like side by side, we'd have to angle them just a bit because the property line is not wide enough to do 2 side by side. And now I know we could do probably something similar to what you're doing, but we couldn't do 4. So we'd have to make a road and then do 2 on one side and 2 on the other. So they would be having to face each other.
Yeah. And I think that'd be really pretty too.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of what we're dealing with. If we wanted to just do 3, I think we could do 2 in the front, make a road down the middle, and maybe 1 towards the back of the property. But then that back house is looking at 2 backyards, which is probably not good. So I think we've got some options. We just haven't even gotten that far because we're still trying to figure out everything else first.
Okay. Another point or suggestion you would may consider is, if 4 seems like too much for you, but you could build 4, maybe draw it with 4 and only plan to build 2 or 3. But now you have this part of the section set aside that, like, hey, whoever big corporate's going to buy this thing off of you, here's our 2 facilities, and you can build this. It's already planned right there for 2 more.
I think it'll be easier for us to share our vision if we do that as well. That's what I was going to say. So Brett, do you have something you can share on some of these like handwritten ones where we can get an idea of the width that you dealt with there? I'm just because I know it'll be something similar to that, seeing if we can fit two in there.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I want to. What's the width of that property that you've got that you shared with us? I'm looking at the like your hand one that you overlaid that with the septic lines.
Sure. Let me pull it back up.
I'm just trying to get an idea of how much we would need to
it's
have
300
two,
feet
have them
across.
side by side. Or I don't know, Lindy may want them staggered or some other formation.
Yeah, no worries.
Feng shui.
So straight across. So here's the property line here, and then here.
Okay.
This is 300 feet across.
Okay.
So I'm working backwards then, right? So here's what I know. My building is 110 this way, I think from memory. Then I know I had 20 feet there, so that's 130. Then I have my road at 26 feet, 156. It goes right up against the property line. Maybe there's like a foot, 150. We'll call it 156. We'll call it 160 to round off. This road here is another 26 feet, so it's 185-ish. And then so that left me with 125 feet roughly from here and here. And that was really important to me. I didn't want the road over here. I really like this area. And I actually putting a big like pavilion in here. And my thoughts like I have least space to play and maybe put like a garden or some benches or some like a playground. I don't know what I want to do, but I kind of envision this to be like almost like a community like HOA area here. Because again,
Okay.
for what my vision is and what I'm trying to sell this is like a little tiny high-end mansion neighborhood. And so if it's
Right.
your own neighborhood, then maybe you have like a little community center or like community like picnic area, that kind of stuff is really what I wanted here. Does that help you or?
Yep.
So yeah, so 300 feet across was more than enough for me. And then it's 1,200 feet deep all the way back to here. And I believe off memory, it's like 900 feet to this tree line. So really, I'm only using this area here.
How many feet would you have wanted if you had wanted to put them side by side? Or wouldn't you have? Or would you have staggered them if you had more width?
So I drew this out. This is, you see it here. So this is
yeah.
one of the first things I was playing with before I found this property. So road down here at the bottom, road that comes up, house 1, 2, 3, 4, and then what did I put? I put parking back there. This was one other idea that I had if I had like a big square property of what I might do. So Lindy, it might be something like this.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I think our property would be great that way. It's just, I really hated the face, the property is facing east and west. And I know that's not a huge deal. It's just a personal preference for me, but if that's the way it's got to be that way.
Yeah. Okay. And for me, like if you did this, right, like I didn't necessarily want to see like the side of a building, right? So we put in just a really nice fence where, I wonder if I can show you all. I literally have been like, I've spent the last like year or more finding all the different things that I really love and like taking pictures of them to copy them. And there's this builder who built the most gorgeous wall. And I want to see if I can show you all. Am I still shared or no?
No.
No.
Okay. 20. Let's see if I can find it. And I'll pull it up. It might take me a minute, so if y'all have other things you want to talk about, we can hit it while I'm doing this.
So Brett, did I hear you say $200,000 or $300,000 more to if you don't have the utilities on the property already, say water and sewer?
Yeah,
that
that's
the
what it
same?
would be worth to me, because and it's really going to depend on a few different things, but what makes it so expensive for me was my fire marshal was super aggressive, and he wants,
Yeah.
as far as fire water, he wants 1,500 gallons of water per minute for 120 minutes of working water to put out a fire, which is, I mean, most fire marshals, they'll want like 500 gallons a minute. I mean, like, there's no way they're shooting 1,500 gallons out of their damn hose.
Right.
But that's what he wanted, times 2 hours, which is usually a long time, is usually 1 hour, right? Like, it's pretty common for 30 minutes. So anyways, that being said, so now that means I have to store 180,000 gallons of water on the property in a huge ass tank, and it's roughly about $1 per gallon for those tanks. So
Gotcha.
now 180,000 for the tank, plus the slab is a huge slab, so there's 20 grand. Plus I have to have this huge pump and pump house, which is like another 70 grand. So I'm at least 270 in on this thing, and then that doesn't count putting in the well. And again, it
Yeah.
could not be a residential well. And that's a whole nother gray area topic on whether you can use it or not, and what you're not supposed to. But again, that's a gray area of, you know, like Victoria, for example, is using a residential well. And no one has told her that she couldn't. So technically, I believe if you are servicing more than 25 people, then you're a public water source. And so if you technically, by state of Texas rules, if you have 2 houses, right, then you cannot use a residential well, and you cannot use 2 residential wells if, you know, there was right next to each other.
Okay.
So I couldn't find this wall, but no worries.
And that would just be for like using as a water source. Like, say if we wanted to just use our wells for like just irrigation
Yeah,
for
totally
like
fine.
this water sprinklers, we could do that.
Yeah, it's just drinking water.
Drinking water.
So let's see, a couple things like you would add. So no one actually called me out on, well, the health department, Williamson County Health Department put it in their application. They said, hey, what's your source of water? And I told them, well, and then their comment back was, okay, then I need to see your approval from TCEQ, which is Texas something quality commission or something. But it's a state thing that you have to go get a permit for, which means it's not a residential well because you don't really need a permit for that. So my health department is requiring it, but otherwise the county didn't ask for it, the city didn't ask for it, and it was under the radar. So again, you may fly under the radar with some of this stuff, and it looks like Victoria is with that. But yeah.
So
just
just,
something to-
if we were to do that, is it something where, like she said, we kind of have like a paper trail? So that way, if they email us and say, yeah, that's, you know, not required, or you don't have to have this, and then they come back later and say, oh, by the way, yeah, now you have to have this, and you say, well, that's not what you said in your original email. Just always making sure you have a paper trail on everything, right? Not just like a phone call or something in writing. So I don't know. I'm afraid I've kind of run into some issues, like, you know, at the very beginning with the fire marshal, and I keep getting the runaround, and
Yeah.
I'll call the, you know, because we're still in the ETJ. And so then I'll call the county fire marshal, and he tells me, oh, you need to talk to the city fire marshal. And then he says, no, you need to call this guy. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh my word, this is getting really frustrating.
Right.
But Brett, that's why
Um,
you said you wanted to talk to him, right? Because you've been burned by people telling you don't need stuff, and then you end up needing it.
Yeah.
Isn't that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It cost me 6 months and like 250 grand.
That's why we got to talk to people direct.
Yeah. So I would just stop in and, you know, be friendly and be yourself and go meet them and say, hey, here's what I want to do. And bring, you know, draw out your thing like this and say, here's what I want to kind of do. Like, can you give me some feedback on this, and how can I do it? Yeah, when you're there in the building, I mean, it's a lot harder for them to kind of brush you off. Yeah. Any other questions?
I think we got it.
Was this helpful
Well,
or was this
definitely have questions.
intimidating or
Yes,
how did
Yes and yes.
it go? But
no, it's good. It's
step by
good. I mean,
step. I just gave you like a whole bunch of stuff, but it's literally step by step, like in sequence. So it's not as overwhelming as it seems when you say it all at one time.
yeah.
And did you say the lady that you've worked with your civil engineer would be able to help us too, even though
Yeah.
she's not local?
Uh-huh.
Okay. I
Yeah, she's
I
in
like
Bastrop.
using somebody like that that's already got some experience, and you've kind of led the way for us, so it makes me feel more comfortable that she has a better idea of what we're trying to do than start with some civil engineer that's, not really familiar with a 16 unit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. All of her work, everything to do with civil is really nothing to do with what an assisted living is. It doesn't matter if it's a car wash on there or assisted living, right? It's just where's the building going to go and how does it all work on the land?
One other question real quick. When you're talking about like these huge numbers for like asphalt and curbing and all your stuff for water wells and all of that, is that included in your like your builder's cost, or is that stuff that comes separate, like when we're raising capital versus getting our loan?
Yeah, it's all fundable.
Where does that-
That's what you mean.
It's what?
You can put it, you can raise the money for that, or you can get it from the bank,
Okay.
right? It's
Okay.
not separate cash you have to come up with. It's all one
But it's
project.
also probably not something that the builder's going to think. He's not thinking asphalt and curbing at all. You know what I mean?
Should, yeah. If you're gonna have
He should.
yeah, for sure. If you're gonna have a new construction, right? Like, and
Yeah.
you have this big, you obviously need utilities and you need a road.
Right.
He'll think about that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because our guy, you said Lindy didn't think about fencing or irrigation, correct? Or he did?
Well, not that he didn't think of it, he just he didn't
Include it.
necessarily like, yeah. But he
Yeah.
kind of gave me a quote already on
Okay.
what is common for that. I mean, he's been building for a long time, and so I'm not worried about that. And he did mention, asphalt costs and getting a soil study done, and so I mean, he knows what he's doing. I just didn't. I've never built a house before, so this is so new to me, and so I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything that we have to do. But I know that our builder knows all that. We haven't gotten that far into it with him yet. So I'm pretty sure the price he quoted us was for all of that.
Curbs, is that necessary?
It's not necessary, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could literally just do asphalt that kind of just rolls off into the dirt like this, and it's way cheaper.
Yeah.
Doesn't look as nice, but it's definitely cheaper. And again, we've talked about your market and your market's a little lower, and those are some of the considerations that you may just say, like, I don't think I need to spend that money.
Right.
But again, when I gave you my numbers, it's like, gosh, it's 50. I don't know. It's a long driveway. Like as you do the big U loop, and it's a lot. It's like it's a lot. So
A lot of curbs.
yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. I recorded this. I will put it in the portal